That's slightly different. And that's when we're saying it's a pneumonitis. It's an inflammation inside the chest wall, and it's coming across as different than influenza. You still get the fever, you still get the body aches that come with fevers, but it's a little bit different. Okay. So can you guys see this here right now?
Yep.
So this graph right here is the media is going to want you to look at these big numbers in the blue up in the over here. That's not where you should be looking. This is a graph that everyone has access to here in San Diego. Look at this little graph down here of positive tests. This is the orange on the bottom here. It's 117, 78, 50, 76, 98. These are new positive tests that are happening per day. And this needs to be married up with something that they don't even put in a graph for you. Is if you want to look at this in a graph, you need to know your denominator also. These are the number of tests that we're doing a day. When you put those two numbers together, we're doing about 1,000 tests a day, each day here across all of San Diego County, and about 5% of those tests are positive. We will know we're doing better when the number of tests stay the same and the number of cases start to drop down a little bit more.
Well said.
And that is kind of what we're seeing. 5% means that 1 out of 20 people who think that they have COVID or have triggered me enough to think I need to test them are even coming back positive. That's great. It's fantastic news, and it's where we want to be. San Diego is doing amazing. They are having more than 8,000 positive tests a day in New York City. We're having 50, and our population is not that much different. Of the top 10 populated cities in the country, San Diego is near the bottom, along with San Antonio and San Jose, as far as the top 10 most populated cities. So we're walking around there. We got our masks on. We're arguing over who should walk in the street, whether it's the older person or the person with a dog. We may seem a little bit crazy when we're doing it. We may be shaming each other for not wearing masks while we're out in public, but it's working here in San Diego. We're going to get through this crisis faster. It's the reason why we're already talking about changing our social distancing and getting back to our economy being opened. That conversation is not even happening on the East Coast. It's not happening in the Southeast. It's only going to be happening in states that either weren't affected in the first place, like North Dakota and Wyoming, or places like the West Coast, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego are the places that are going to be talking about that. Let me get back to testing just a little bit too. 80% sensitive, 80% specific. That means you line up 5 people behind me, all 5 of them. We know they have COVID for whatever reason. We know they have it. We test them. 1 out of 5 of them will test negative, even though we know they have it. You take
really
more. Yes, that's where this test is. It's 80% sensitive and specific, which means it has a lot of false positives and a lot of false negatives. Ideally, we want that number to be 90, if not 95 or even higher for us to be able to count on it. When you ask me, do I have COVID, and I do the swab on you, you want me to say, no, you don't have it, and you want that to be true. 1 out of 5 times it may not even be there, which means that we still need to rely on our own instincts, which has changed since December. I did not know enough about COVID to say if you did or didn't have it. Now I've seen enough patients, they're all tight in the chest. They're all talking about shortness of breath. They have almost no complaints of any upper respiratory stuff. They're not complaining about a lot of runny nose, stuffiness, no sinus symptoms. I haven't seen anyone with ear pain yet at all. It's all down deeper in your chest. People are coming in saying, it's weird, doc. It's like this tightness. And they describe it differently. And you ask them a little bit about shortness of breath. They're like, yeah, it seems like I want more air and I'm not getting enough. That's slightly different. And that's when we're saying it's a pneumonitis. It's an inflammation inside the chest wall. And it's coming across as different than influenza. You still get the fever. You still get the body aches that come with fevers, but it's a little bit different. That's the PCR testing, polymerase chain reaction, DNA, RNA. It's looking for the presence of the virus. You hopefully have also started hearing about the antibody test. The antibody test is actually what we're doing when we're looking for the presence of our response to it.
Okay.
When you get your measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, when you get your diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis vaccine, we check your titers when you're an adult. Your titers are the presence of your antibodies. There's 2 kinds. Your first kind is going to be your memory B cells, and those B cells are what happens if you've been exposed to the antigen at all. When you've had a secondary exposure to it, then you make something called plasma cells, and those are the guys that we really want, and those are the ones that make antibodies. If you have antibodies floating around your bloodstream, Once those antibodies are there, if you get exposed to that virus again, the antibodies immediately jump on top of it, and it does not have an opportunity to create an infection here.
Right.
If you just have the memory cells, there's a different situation there where the memory cells have to convert into an active form, and so you can still get sick. This is something that we're worried about with COVID. Right. It has a lot of characteristics that are similar to other viruses like RSV, where we get a temporary immunity, which could be anywhere between 6 months and 12 months, and is less likely with that single exposure to give us a permanent immunity towards it. So I have to say is I'm a little concerned that come this next fall is that even if we've developed an immunity, is that we may be able to catch this virus again. So that's where the antibody tests are going to come into play. When we look at the antibody tests, let me show you another picture of what we refer to when we're looking at antibody tests here.
Please.
I'm not going to go too crazy onto this guy here. Can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
So this graph over here is talking about the number of days since you've been infected. So Jesse sneezes on me right here. I don't have any symptoms at all for up to 5 days, maybe 14. That's where the 14-day quarantine comes into place. Okay. On this graph, we've shown it as 5 days symptom-free. Day 5, you start to show some symptoms. What am I going to find on testing? Well, that's what we call the window period. During those first 5, 6, 7 days, you're not going to find anything besides the presence of virus. That's why you need a swab. If you're willing and can wait until around day 10 to day 14, that's when you're going to be able to check for something called IgM. IgM is my antibodies that I've temporarily released into my body, okay, and that you can measure with these antibody tests. So that would tell me is that if I have IgM present, I have already been infected. Okay, and that's good news. This is something I want to show. So I have not felt like I've tested that I've had really bad symptoms with COVID yet. But when antibody tests are available, I'm going to be looking to get a test that's going to be looking for my IgM or ideally IgG, which is this red line over here. IgG is going to be your long-term immune cell that says that I've got a longer lasting appearance. You've seen this word up in here before, convalescence, convalescent home, nursing home. This is a place where you're improving. So convalescence is when I no longer have any symptoms. Okay, so you have a window period, you have a symptomatic period, you have a period of time up to 21 days when your symptoms are improving, and then you are in recovery, and that takes about another 7 days or so. When you get this virus, you're likely to have symptoms for up to 7 days, 28 days, 1 full month.
That's fascinating. So let me just unpack that just a little bit. You don't have to put it back up. But the concept of when you get the symptoms, you said that first little window, you called it the window period, lasting up to 7+ days right there.
Right.
The virus is present. If you got a test at that point in time, would you be able to know, thank you, would you be able to know that you had the COVID? Or would it just show up as any type of virus at that point? Like, would it be specific?
That's been part of the problem. So part of the problem is that coronaviruses and these tests that are getting these emergency use authorizations, EUAs from the FDA, they are very, very low quality. Nobody is testing the quality. So some of these tests are just looking for coronaviruses.
Right.
And the common cold is actually a type of coronavirus. Right. It's a very mild one, but you don't know when you're coming up with some of these false positives and false negatives, which one that you might have. And the same problem is starting to happen with really, really crummy IgM tests that are coming out of China and some other locations right now. So rather than rushing to get an antibody test, is we need to make sure that we get a quality test to make sure that if you're testing positive, that you know you have it. So if I have IgM or IgG present in my bloodstream, I don't want to go and start making out with Jesse because I think that I'm immune to him having an infection. I need to genuinely know is I can go and test people and I can safely get into things. Let's think about this. How are any of us going to feel comfortable sitting on an airplane? You know, how am I going to sit next to somebody on an airplane for 4 hours unless I know that I'm immune? I don't want to think that I'm immune. And this is going to be where this is going to be really controversial. And I'm not the one that's making this up, but this is something else that we talk about, that we're looking at here, which is, are we going to be getting an immunity certificate? Is this something that we're going to have to carry around like a scarlet letter?
Wow.
You can think about what this means is, how do you create these? Is there going to be one that's artificially produced? But if you're trying to do interstate travel, or if you're trying to go intercontinental,
Right.
Country to country, or getting onto an airplane, I'd really like to see you wearing the certificate if you're sitting next to me. It's going to be a badge that a lot of people are wearing. And this is something they've talked in a lot of different countries, Germany being one country that has been trying to figure this out. And of course, they have one of the lowest rates of industrialized nations of COVID deaths, as well as COVID positive outbreaks. As we get back to having more people that are going to be getting back in contact with each other, how do we stay comfortable sitting next to each other? Can we even talk about the football season starting? Can you sit next to somebody in a stadium? What is this going to look like? Is having a way of demonstrating that you have immunity is one of them. I don't care if you test positive. I care if you have immunity. If you have immunity, I know you're not going to spread it to me. And if I have immunity, I know I'm not going to catch it even if you don't have that certificate. So these are going to be things that we're going to start to see coming out here pretty shortly. The antibody tests have been made live at UCSD this week. They have not had any mention of sensitivity and specificity. They are just saying that they are now officially available. So be looking to hear the difference of testing from PCR over to antibody testing, which is going to be the transition that we're all making in the upcoming weeks. Probably weeks, I think, is probably an accurate number.